Hello everybody. Now today I am back with another new topic, and today we will discuss what is the difference between a metaphor and conceit. And before we focus basically on conceit, we will revise what is a metaphor. A metaphor is a figure of speech. We all know that. But what is the main difference, or what is the main characteristic which helps us to identify a metaphor very easily is that it is a very direct comparison between two very different things by saying one thing is another. Let's check out a few examples here which are given, and through that we will understand with clarity as to what is a metaphor. Ravi is a walking encyclopedia. That means what are the two different things which are being compared to each other? Ravi and encyclopedia. That means Ravi is being compared to a walking encyclopedia. That means he is being referred to as very knowledgeable. Second sentence reads as Ram is a night owl. So Ram is being compared to an owl. And why a night owl? Because he is very studious and prefers to stay up at night just like an owl and study. So night owl, whenever somebody is being compared to a night owl, it means that the person is very active or keeps awake till very late in the night, just like an owl is awake in the night. And most often it is said that the person might be doing productive work at night, and therefore one person is being compared to a night owl. Seema has a heart of gold. So here again the comparison is very direct, and Seema is being called as having a heart of gold. So that means she must be very pure in her thoughts and feelings, and therefore she is being compared to the purity of gold. Next, let us focus on conceit. Now, conceit is also a figure of speech, just as a metaphor and a simile. All these three are figures of speech which deal with comparison. Now, difference between a simile and metaphor is already discussed in my previous videos, which you can watch and understand. I will give you the link in my description. And in this video, we will just focus on the difference between a metaphor and conceit. Now, a conceit is an extended figure of speech, often an elaborate metaphor or simile. Why an elaborate metaphor or simile? Because it compares two very unlike things. Now this is very important, because even in simile and metaphor we compare two things which are different, but they are not very different. There you will always find that there is some kind of a similarity which is present in both the things which are being compared, and therefore the similarity is very imaginable. It is believable. It is easily traceable when an example is being given. The only difference in conceit is that the difference between the two things being compared is very unlikely. That means the two things which are being compared, the characteristic of both the things are so different that it becomes very unbelievable or unimaginable for a layman or for an ordinary person to understand as to how so different things are being compared to each other, because there is no similarity which is apparent, right? So let us read again. A conceit is an extended figure of speech of an elaborate metaphor or simile that compares two very unlike things. But then how is this comparison struck? This comparison in a conceit between the two unlike things is very surprising for any person, because it is a very, very intellectual or clever comparison. Often it is unbelievable. People can't even believe that so different things can have any similarity between themselves. So, in other words, we can call it an unconventional comparison. Unconventional comparison means that it is mostly very rare or very rarely used by any writer or reader, right, or speaker. So it is an unconventional comparison which is more intellectual than sensual. More intellectual than sensual means that it is more inclined on an intellectual plane rather than based on sensory observations, right? So a layman or an ordinary person will find a little difficulty in understanding this kind of a comparison, and therefore it's called a conceit. It is just one notch higher than the comparison which is struck in a metaphor. Let us check out an example from everyday life to understand it. The broken heart is a damaged china pot. Now over here, a broken heart is being compared to a china pot, right? And you will find the minute you read this kind of an example, you find it very difficult to even imagine as to how somebody can compare a broken heart to a china pot rather than to anything else. Now look at the very second sentence here. It says, or the example, my life is like a free online game. Who will compare somebody's life to a free online game, right? It further says that people seem to be playing with. Usually people play online games, but when they are free, they often play it, right? And they're very casual. With a very casual attitude, they play this kind of an online game, and therefore somebody is trying to compare his own life. Whenever we talk of life, there is a seriousness attached to it. Nobody talks of life with a very casual kind of an attitude. And if you see the second thing which is being compared to it is online game, and that too an online game which is free. That means one serious thing, my life, is being compared to something very, very casual, like a free online game, and people seem to be playing with. Playing with means they are enjoying it. So therefore this kind of a conceit is, or comparison, is not seen very easily in writings or in texts or while speaking. So therefore this kind of a comparison becomes a very rare comparison. It just seems to be a little odd to, to grasp or to understand. But then if you really focus a little, you will definitely understand that this is again a comparison made, but a very rare kind, or a comparison which is not easily identifiable. So this is the basic difference between a metaphor and a conceit. That a conceit is a comparison which is one notch higher than a metaphor. It is more complex, it is more intellectual, and the two things being compared are very, very different, often to the level of being unimaginably compared. So let us take a few examples of conceit from English literature. You must have heard of the poet John Donne, and he is a very famous metaphysical poet. So John Donne has compared himself and his beloved's soul to be the two legs of a geometry compass in his poem A Valediction Forbidden Morning. Alright, so in this poem, John Donne, he compares himself and his beloved's soul to be the two legs of a geometry compass. That means the two legs are said to be him and his beloved, and one is stationary, one leg is stationary, the other keeps revolving around the second leg. The second leg keeps revolving around the first leg, and therefore, but then when we observe that two ends of the legs are very, very far apart, but then they are joined at the top. Both the legs are joined at one end. That means even when two lovers are different or they are distanced from each other, they are not together, yet their thoughts keep to be revolving around each other's presence, even in absence, and in this way both the lovers are attached to each other at one end. At the other end, they might be physically separate, they might be physically distant, or probably not in touch with each other. So in case you ever read this poem, A Valediction Forbidden Morning, you will definitely find this example as a very rare example, yet very captivating for readers. Again, we see in the second example of William Shakespeare that he compares his beloved to the beauty of a summer's day. And in this sonnet, the beloved is presumably a young man or fair youth. Now, the specific identity of this young man is unknown or anonymous. It has not been clearly specified in the poem, but some believe that he might be a friend or a patron of William Shakespeare, whose beauty the poet wants to immortalize in his verse or poem. So the sonnet's name is Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day. The word thee here is a young man, and the beauty of the young man is being compared to a summer's day. Therefore, we observe that the comparison here is again a conceit. Why? Because it is a very far-fetched comparison. Very far-fetched comparison and an unbelievable comparison where a young man is being compared for his beauty, and that too very unbelievably with a summer's day, rather than, beauty is often compared to a flower, beauty is often compared to a vase, beauty is always compared to something visibly attractive or beautiful. But here the comparison is pretty unique and rare, where the beauty is being compared to a season's day, which is summer. So whenever you read the sonnet 18 of William Shakespeare, you can observe more details within the poem and read them and observe the various conceits he has used meticulously there. All right. The third example here deals with the poem I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud. This is a very famous poem, and I'm sure you must have read it somewhere or heard about it. It is written by William Wordsworth, and it compares a host of golden daffodils as the Milky Way. Now, how does it compare these golden daffodils? Because a host of golden daffodils means that it is a continuous, unending line of golden daffodils which he seems to be observing, and therefore he compares this unending, continuous line of golden daffodils to be the stars which shine and twinkle in the Milky Way. Just as there are stars in the sky, or there are stars in the Milky Way which shine and twinkle, and in the night sky these stars appear to be shining and sparkling in an unending way, in a continuous line, just like a host of golden daffodils shine in the sunlight. So, a host of golden daffodils are being compared to the stars in the Milky Way. Got it? So, we have observed in all these three examples that the comparison between the two very different things here is again very far-fetched. It is little bit difficult to understand. It's little bit complex. It's more inclined on the intellectual plane rather than, just sensory observation. Sensory observation identification is very easy, right? You can easily find that, okay, fine, these two things are very different, but in some way they are very similar, and similarity can be identified very easily. But in conceit, please remember that the comparison struck is more on the intellectual plane. It is very complex, it is unconventional, and it is most often unimaginable or unbelievable. So let us talk about the key differences which we can always keep in mind to identify a metaphor and a conceit. A metaphor is a direct comparison between two things. What does it mean that it is a direct comparison? Here you will have to keep in mind that it is a direct comparison because it does not use the word as or like while making the comparison, just as it is done in a simile. So it is called a direct comparison. It simply states that this is this. That means first thing is the second thing. It does not say that the first thing or the object is like the second object. This is what is meant by a direct comparison. Alright, a conceit is an extended, we have already discussed that it is an extended metaphor or a simile. Logically complex, metaphor or simile, yes, it is very complex. It is not a simple comparison. A simple comparison which is very sensual, which is very obvious, which is to the level of observation, right, which any ordinary person can easily identify and find and understand it. It is a little bit complex, logically complex, right, and often unimaginable, that where the person who is making the comparison always finds that how they are so different that to find a similarity becomes very difficult. So we say that it is logically complex metaphor or simile that often dominates a whole passage or poem. The last bit of this sentence is also very important because it is a very important trait of a conceit, that often conceit is an extended metaphor present in multiple lines or multiple clauses, multiple sentences of the passage, or you will find it in multiple stanzas, in multiple sentences of the poem. Let's look at two different examples to make the distinction very clear. example of a metaphor is all the world is a stage. That means the world is being compared to a stage. And look at the direct comparison which is made here. All the world, it says, is a stage. That means it is being a little definite about the world being a stage. It is not saying that the world is like a stage, as said in a simile. It is not saying that world is as a stage, just like we say it simply in a simile. So it is identified as a metaphor here. In a conceit, there is an example here which states that comparing the journey of life to a ship sailing through stormy seas. That means whenever the journey of life is being compared to a ship which sails through stormy seas. Now, what will be the stormy seas here? Stormy seas would be the various events of life, or the challenges of life, or the difficult phases of life. That means whenever this is being compared, or these two things are being compared, a ship and a life, a ship is also moving in the ocean on a journey. It is sailing through the stormy sea, and on the other end, the journey of life is being compared to it. So this kind of a comparison, which is more complex, which is more extended, right? It is more unimaginable, right? And it has a lot of details into it, and it might extend in the entire text. So it becomes a conceit. I hope that you must have understood it. So let's check out the significance of conceits to understand them better. As to how and why do we use conceits in literature or in English language while speaking or in writing. So let's check out the four important significant points, and we'll see that it states that we can surprise, we can shock and amuse others by using very unimaginable and unbelievable conceits in language. And why so? Because it stimulates intellectual thinking of the reader, right? So intellectual thinking and critical thinking of the reader is very much stimulated when we use, unbelievable, unimaginable comparisons, and the reader is forced to think hard as to how this kind of a comparison is so valid, and it surprises the reader. It shocks at times, and it might also amuse the reader. So it is very important. The use of conceits in language is important. And the second point states that as conceits make very unusual, unlikely and far-fetched comparisons, the readers look at things in a new way. That means that the comparisons made in a conceit are very unusual, they are unlikely, and they are very far-fetched. So this provokes the readers to look at the two different things in a very different way, in a very new way, to find out as to how the two things being very different or very unlikely in comparison can also have very small little or very tiny little similarity for comparison, right? So here the reader looks at the two different things in a very new way or in a very new perspective, right? So third point states that in the study of literature, it is used as a tool. The conceit is being used as a literary tool or a literary device to develop interest in the readers. Now, as readers read literary texts, so when they come across conceits, it amazes them, it surprises them, it amuses often, and it shocks also. So conceits are literary tools which help to develop or to grasp the interest of the readers and to bind them to the text and provoke them to think about it intellectually and in a very different perspective. Now, the fourth point says that conceits in real life give complex and abstract ideas and emotions a simplicity. That means when ideas which we are comparing, or the two things which we are talking about, when this idea is very complex, it's very difficult to understand, or it is an abstract idea, an emotion, then conceits which are being used as examples from real life, they give to it a lot of simplicity. And how this is being done? Because it can be easily understood by comparing them to day-to-day objects. That means abstract ideas and emotions which are difficult to understand, which are difficult to express, which are difficult to convey, often when we compare them to day-to-day simple objects, that means we are bestowing a simplicity to the comparison, and therefore the complex idea we are talking about, which is difficult for an ordinary person to understand, right, becomes very simple for any reader to understand when these abstract ideas or emotions are compared to day-to-day objects. This is being said in the last point. So I hope you must have understood the significance of conceits as to how and why do we use conceits to improve or to enhance the quality of the English literature, whether in text or whether in speech, right? They always enhance the quality of the language. So, thank you so much, and please subscribe to my channel and also comment your feedback. I would love to read your comments and to respond as well. So have a great day. Thank you so much.